It's connecting. Okay, great. We're live and I will admit everyone. So it's connecting.
Good evening or good morning, as may be the case in your town, in your place. So nice to see so many faces that we already met, and I see some new faces. So nice. Well, we're going to meet together. I hope that we will be able to meet each other in a more intimate way. It will come up. So good to see you. Okay, so maybe we'll start with the with the prayer that Lama Lina does. I hope that everybody knows. I'm not sure who is here in this group, but if not, just listen to that. This is mainly the refuge and the bodhicitta prayer together combined into the lineage prayer, which is more of the Guru Yoga prayer. So we'll do it. You can join me or not. Chöku'i kundu zangwa Doje semba gerab doje dang. Shere singi badu shing labde. Dedang macho tata tu sumchi. Zokchen chupela mala sova. De. Ogen pema junila sova. De. Doje chang chetiro narodang. Mapa mira gompa tsatsapa. Na pupadang palden tupaso. Kagyola manamla sova. Ande. Gelugna manamla sova. Nimana manamla sova. Lamalina namanamla sova. Ade. Pakundu zongtang yerme pa. Gonger abdo jishing trak pa. Chite dang nisume pa. Palamanum cheten. Terchon. Okay, so now we're going to start some new course, now some new teachings. It's very exciting here. So I'll give you some brief what's going to happen. It's not going to take too long because I do want to get into the subject that we're diving in today. So basically, diving into Vajrayana actually was the title that I chose because many people consider Tantra, not considering Vajrayana as Tantrayana and the other way around. And there is a reason why Vajrayana is the word that we are going to tackle here in our teachings, because Tantra is one aspect of Vajrayana. I'm not sure if everybody knows about that. And, you know, if you do want to practice Tantra, and I guess that many of you either practicing Tantra or interested in Tantra. So we want to have the bigger view or the bigger context of why are we practicing what we do practice, and maybe it's going to intrigue you into diving into Vajrayana, which we're going to do together. So basically, we divided these teachings into three, I would say, models, okay? The first is to find out what are the origins of the Tantrayana or the Vajrayana. Because if we don't know the history, especially if you're Lama Lina's students, you know that the context of the history and the culture that we are having with receiving the teachings is very important, because otherwise we can take things that are not belong to our way of life or to our way of practicing the Tantra, and we might do ourselves some harm. So we want to bring the origins, to know the history of where the Tantra comes from, how it developed into the broader context of Vajrayana. And then the second model is the psychology of Tantra. And I think that this is my favorite part, because I don't know how many of you know me, but I'm practicing in my clinic. I am a psychotherapist, so I'm practicing in my clinic the Buddhist psychology. So having that education on one hand and having the Tantrayana education on the other hand, what happened is that I could see how it's merged together, and especially that most people here, or all people here, are Westerners. So psychology, it's much more approachable to us. So we want to understand how we do that. And the third model is the model that actually talks about the tools, because like any other practical practice that Buddhism has to give us, providing us, it's very, very practical. And Vajrayana, Tantrayana has a lot of tools. Now, if you, for some reason, have a toolbox in your house, so you know that you want to pick the right tool for the right job. Otherwise, you're going to miss out. You don't take a screw in order, I don't know, to open the sink or something, okay? Because otherwise you're going to break it, and a lot of mess will come around your house. It's the same thing in Tantra. You don't want to mess, picking up the wrong tool in order to practice something that might mess up. And again, if you're Lama Lina's students, you know that in many occasions, especially on the Zoom, she says to somebody, okay, this is the instructions only for you. Okay, it's not something that everybody now goes and practice, I don't know, Chöd, for example. Okay, so you need to understand exactly why do you use the Chöd tool in order to understand what it's gonna providing you. Now, because before I dive into the first model, we're gonna dive into the first model because for me, it's so interesting to understand where those amazing tools came from, and what is the context that we bring them to our life, and how it's gonna improve our life on a daily basis on one hand, and on the other hand, on the path. It can bring us to enlightenment, in one lifetime. That's the promise of Tantra, if you practice Tantra, okay? We'll be distinguishing between what is the Hinayana path or the Theravada path, and then what is the Mahayana and Tantrayana. And also we'll just give a small kick into the Dzogchen and Mahamudra, which is a different path, although it's combined together in the Tantra, in more advanced practices of the Tantra. So before we dive into it, I just want to give you some information about my background, because I was studying with many, many teachers, mainly in the Gelug tradition. Gelug tradition, as you know, is very academical, and you have a lot of tools on one hand, but the emphasis is on the academical. So I had many amazing teachers, and I'm grateful to what they gave me. And then my eyes, or my tawa was opened up to dive into the Drikung Kagyu and also to the Nyingma. I just a little bit studied and practiced the Sakya path, but I'm not an expert in the Sakya. So if you have questions about Sakya, I cannot help you with that. So mainly with those in those traditions. I think that the main approach that I'm trying to bring into my life as a Tantrika, as a practitioner of Tantra, and also to my students is to combine the deep understanding of the traditional Tantra on one hand, and on the other hand, how to apply it in your daily life. Because we don't live in Tibet and we don't live in the caves. We are family holders. We have job to hold. We have, some of us have family, kids, maybe grandchildren, all of these amazing, amazing practices and bring them into our life. And actually, I don't know if you know, but Tantra mainly was given to those who were governors in Tibet. Okay, we'll talk about how the origins of Tantra, but at the end of the day, those kings that they were governing, they were very busy. You know, to be a king is a very busy job. You know, you have to see what's going on. You have to manage your continent, your kingdom, whatever. So they had the opportunity to have a very concise tools in order to practice them in a very short time on one hand, and on the other hand, to be able to transform the self into the best way they could. It's true that some of the most amazing traditional practitioners that became actually enlightened and became Buddhas were also yogis in the caves. But it's not always the case. So I don't know what's in your life. Some of you I know, so I don't know what's going on in your life. But in the end of the day, I think that Tantra is the amazing practice that can be brought together to our life and create the fastest change, transformation that can happen in our life. So I want to say thank you to all my teachers, and especially to Lama Lena, which is my root and my heart teacher. I had the opportunity to study with her for some, I don't know, 7 something like years. And since then, my life has been changed dramatically. And I'm sure you share with me this approach about what's going on with her. So we'll start with the first model, which is the origins of Tantra, or the origins of Vajrayana. And actually, when we go to that, in order to understand that, maybe we better start with understanding what is Vajrayana. Because why we want to dive into the Vajra world. I mean, the Vajra world is something which is so magnificent and it's so elaborated. What does it mean? So the Vajra world in Sanskrit, actually, it's not Vajrayana, it's Vajradhatu. And Vajradhatu actually means in Sanskrit, the level of the reality, which is beyond all thoughts and all imagination. So when you want to dive into thinking about that, it's beyond all impermanence and beyond all changes. Because what do we have as phenomena? Phenomena is, it can be feeling, thoughts, perceptions. Everything is changing, right? We know that from the Dzogchen teaching. So it's beyond all thoughts and beyond all phenomena and beyond, and actually, it's beyond everything that is moving or impermanence or change. So why it's called the Vajrayana? What is the Vajra? We know that the Vajra, we know it as a tool. I mean, maybe I'll have the Vajra here as my tool. Of course, I have the Vajra here. So we have the Vajra as a tool. But as you know, Tantra is all about symbols. So I do have, this is my traveling, that's why it's so small. On my altar, it's a bigger one. But I do have a Vajra, and a Vajra is a symbol. So what is it symbolize? So Vajra, actually, sometimes it's called a diamond. And the characteristic of diamond, that it's indestructible. You can hit it, you can push it, you can do whatever you want, but it's indestructible. So when we talk about the Vajra world, or the diamond world, or sometimes it's called the diamond way, so we talk about something which is indestructible. So what is indestructible here? If we will be able to transform into towards the beyond all phenomena, we will, I don't want to say enter, but we will be in the realm of the indestructibility. And actually, this is the Vajra world. Because it's a realm that described as something which is colorful and vivid and life and filled with unexpected beauty and meaning. But as you could see now, I just moved from the Dharmakaya, which is the place of indestructible, into the Sambhogakaya, and then how it is manifested in the world, in our world, as Nirmanakaya. So the Vajra world is, well, according to Buddhism, of course, is fully realized in habits of a person who has accomplished the transformation of being able to transform into the place where it's beyond all realms and all thoughts and imagination and phenomena. So I think that the main question that I was intrigued by is why we're so attracted to this world. I think it started with the attraction to Tibet. You know, there are people who are saying that actually, since the invasion of the Chinese to Tibet, which was, they completed the invasion in around 1959, 1960, many of us were actually have some kind of a karmic connection to Tibet, because maybe we were Tibetan or we were practicing these practices before. So this karma brought us here because we are some kind of a reincarnation of those minds or those consciousness that were there. So is it attraction to Tibet or to the Vajra world? Maybe there is no differentiation between both of them, because as we know, the Tibetan Buddhism is from Tibet. That's why it's called Tibetan Buddhism. It doesn't call Indian Buddhism, which there is Indian Buddhism, I guess you know. I think we'll talk about it later on. So why we are so attracted to Tibetan Buddhism, and why we're so attracted to Tibet, to the Tibetan culture? Because when you say Tibetan culture, the culture was so embedded in Tantra, and the Tantra was so embedded in the culture and in the social life in Tibet, so you cannot differentiate between the Tibetan culture and the Tibetan Buddhism. Although we see differentiation now when it comes to the West, and we want to differentiate that, because some things were, you know, adapted to Tibet and they belong there. We are not Tibetan, but something is very attraction. You know, there is an attraction to us there. We are very attracted to that. So is it a culture? Maybe there is some kind of romanticism around it, or maybe we are attracted to the exotic part of that because it's very exotic, or maybe it's something else. Maybe we want to find out what is the secret of it, because as soon as we say something is secret, because Tantra are provided as a secret tools, As long as I have a secret, everybody, when we were a child, when somebody says a secret to somebody else, we wanted to know the secret. So very attracted to something that is defined as a secret. But is it the reason why we are attracted to the Tibetan Buddhism? Because it's secret. It's interesting how it developed, because in Tibet, it wasn't secret. I don't know if you know. It wasn't secret. It was all over. Everywhere, you got into the monasteries, they were doing the ritual. And if you knew it, you knew it. Your uncle did it, your mother didn't, your father did it. So it wasn't secret. Only when it developed later on, it became a very secret practices. And then when it came to the West, it became secret because people were not ready to that. So the teachers were very qualified and they could see that people are not ready. So they protect not the teachings. They have been protected the people that wanted to be exposed to the Tantra. It was a very compassionate act, actually. So what is now? When you open the internet, you Google, every practices are on Google, on the internet, everything. All the data is there, all the sadhanas are there, all the teachings are there, all the books are there, everything is there. So what is the secret? Maybe, like the teachers are really like to say, it's not that the teachings is secret. It's protect. You will not be able to understand the teachings. Maybe in the first hand, you will not be attracted to study that if you are not ready. So many teachers now, and especially Lama Lina, also Lama Lina and Garjun Rinpoche, and Drupon Rinchen Rinpoche, some of you were participating in the beautiful Vajrayana retreat that you did last week. So they don't think that the teachings or the practices should be hidden as a secret from people now, because it will be self-secret for those who are not ready for that. And I've been practicing for quite a while, and I've seen people that were not ready, and they dropped off the wagon. They couldn't hold that. So when you practice, what happens? It's that the practice evolved within you. It's not from external inside you. It's from you outside. Okay, so the evolvement of the practice, it's internally. So if it's not a romanticism or some kind of attraction to the exotic or to the secret, so what is it? So basically, it's a spiritual tradition, particularly the Tantric or the Vajrayana Buddhism. So it provides some kind of foundation to understand the Tibetan culture, and the other way around. If you understand the Tibetan culture, you can better understand the Tantrayana. So if we have to describe in only few words, what is this? So it's about happiness and suffering, okay? How to become happier and this is the suffering. It's about life, how we live in a better way. And it's also about death. So this is the culture of Tibet, and also the Tantrayana. It's all around that. So what happened is that the practice of Vajrayana, it opens up an appreciation to the ordinary life as an inspiration, because when you start to practice Tantra, everything becomes an inspiration. You want to transform regular suffering or regular mental afflictions into wisdom. And then comes the liberation. what in the literature called enlightenment, okay? But basically, the enlightenment is liberation from the suffering and creating wisdom as a way of the transformative way of taking the affliction emotion and creating some kind of those wisdoms that we will be talking about later on. So what we call the Vajra world is a sense of some kind of the ultimate nature of reality. Sometimes in the literature, it's been described as a burning ocean, okay? Something which is some kind of an experiential intensity. But behind this intensity lies, in the deep of the ocean, lies a very deep understanding of the wisdom. I mean, there can be waves, there can be burning oceans, there can be whatever on the surface. But when you dive deep into it, and the depth of the ocean, you find the wisdom, and then you can become liberated. So if we want to dive into the Vajra world, so how do we do that? I mean, there are many tools. You can, as I said, you can go into the internet and you can Google and you can do whatever you want. But we cannot, once you dive into Vajrayana, you cannot go into business as usual. Life are being changed dramatically when you do that. I hear a lot of students in Lama Lina's Zooms when they say to her, I just stopped practicing and I find out that I was very busy in my life. I had a child, I had a new job, maybe I was alone, and now I have a partner. So what happens to us when we try to practice that? I mean, diving into it, it's not something which is, just I took the pill one day and that's it. Even if you go to the doctor and you have some kind of an illness, the doctor is asking you to take the pills on a daily basis, right? Until the illness is over. So a lot of time, it refers that the Buddha is the doctor, the Dharma is the medicine, and the Sangha are the nurses. So how are we going to do that? It's not up to me to tell you how to do it. It's up to you to decide how you want to do it. But definitely, when we dive into the Tantrayana, business are not as usual, okay? Because the Vajrayana provides us some kind of tools, means to this burning ocean or to this chaotic life, the turbulent. So if we want to apply that to our life, we do need to take some time in order to learn that, in order to practice that, and in order to start walking on the path. Then when you start walking on the path, the path, the deeper you want to go is up to you, but it's not business as usual. So it's up to you. I mean, we always say that the motivation is the most important thing, right? Those of you who were studying with me before, yes, there is a question about if it's possible to ask questions. Yes, I will go into it in a few minutes. I guess you haven't been studying with me before because we do have time for questions and answers, and we do have time to share. And I think this is what creates a Sangha, and I love that. So we will do, in a few minutes, we'll do some kind of sharing. So if we'll go into the motivation, what kind of motivation do you have in order to practice that. Do you remember those of us who were studying the vows, the tantric vows teachings before? We were putting a lot of efforts about trying to find out what is our motivation. Because if you're going to put some efforts into the Vajra world, into the Tantrayana, so you better clear up your motivation. Otherwise, you'll fall off the wagon. And it might happen sooner than you think. Before we go into the question, I do want to go into a little bit of some history about if we know where the Tantra comes from, because sometimes we think that, if you're in the Gelug tradition, you think that it started in the 15th century or 14th century with Tsongkhapa. Although we all know that it started earlier when Lord Atisha came to Tibet. But it started even earlier when Padmasambhava came to Tibet. But it started even earlier when, the invasion of the Muslims in India happened. But it started even earlier when the Buddhism became something, or the Tantrayana was something which was actually part of the Indian culture. I guess you all know the story about Buddha Shakyamuni, that he was an Indian guy. And he was, a prince that ran away. I'm not going to go through the story because I'm sure that everybody knows, but he started to practice actually the Indian Tantra. It's like the Christianity. Before there was before there was Jesus Christ, there was no Christianity, right? So before there was Buddha, there was no Buddhism. The Buddhism started after Buddha actually started to teach it. And then they said, oh, this is the teaching of the Buddha Shakyamuni or Siddhartha, or what the name that he was born with, or the name he was given afterwards. But there was no Buddhism before that. So actually, the Buddhism flourished in India from the time of the Buddha in the 5th century, at the BCE, of course, and it was kind of going undercover with the Muslim invasion. The Muslim invasion was destroying all the institutions of Buddhism in the North India until about 1200 CE. So during those 1700 years, what happened to Buddhism? Because, Muslim did not allow the Buddhism to flourish. So under the current, there were developed of 3, we'll say, Indian orientation that has been developed. The first one was the 18th school. Sometimes it's called Theravada, or in Sanskrit, it's called Nikaya Buddhism. That's how the first was developed. And later on, after a while, around the 1st BCE, it was the Mahayana, or the Great Vehicle, was developed. And actually, in the 7th century, the Vajrayana has been developed. So you see some kind of development of Buddhism. It didn't start as it is, as you can see it now. Okay, for example, the Tantrayana or the Vajrayana only developed on the 7th century. When I did my research back then, I didn't know about that. I thought, that it was started, all Buddhism, because my karmic connection brought me directly into Vajrayana. I know some of my friends went through those evolvement of the Theravada or the Hinayana, and then the Mahayana, and then only after a while they came to the Vajrayana world. So the Vajrayana, or the tantric vehicle, it's it's actually have been developed on the Indian history of Vajrayana. So later on, what we now, the container now holds the Tantrayana, the Dzogchen, and the Mahamudra under the umbrella of Vajrayana. But it wasn't like that before. So each one of those three, I would say, different approaches is how we practice Dharma in a different way. I mean, there are some distinguished characteristic to the 18 schools or the Theravada Hinayana. There are distinguished characteristics for the Mahayana, which called the Great Vehicle, and there are distinguished characteristics for the Tantrayana and the Vajrayana, including the Mahamudra and the Dzogchen. So each one of them is representing something that has to do with the practice of the Dharma, how we practice the Dharma, because all of that is Dharma. But the approaches to practice that are very different. Just for an example, the 18 schools, what we called, or the Hinayana, or the Theravada, sometimes it's called, it's based on the Four Noble Truths, or what we call sometimes individual nirvana. It doesn't mean that Vajrayana do not understand those Four Noble Truths, but that's what they practice. All practices are around the Four Noble Truths. Mahayana, on the other hand, is emphasis on compassionate and the ideal of compassionate, and also the bodhisattva altruistic practices like the 6 paramitas or the 6 perfections that sometimes called. And then, what is the Vajrayana? When you want to describe Vajrayana, what do you describe? You describe something which is very colorful, very intensive practices that based on the yogic traditions. And also, what is differentiated between those three approaches is that how long you're going to get to be enlightened. They say that in the Hinayana, the first 18 schools, it can take you 1,600 lifetimes. In the Mahayana, it will take you something like 60 lifetimes. And Mahayana and Vajrayana, it's in this lifetime. Of course, I guess you already know that Dzogchen and Mahamudra are saying that it's now. I mean, when you got it, it's now. So I want just a brief history. I'll dive more about the history in our next session, because I want you to understand the culture where it came from. Okay, we're now going to a more broader view about that. So I can open up it now for questions. So please, if you have questions, just raise your hands so I can see if somebody wants. I just want you to know that everything is recorded and will be put on our channel, on our YouTube channel, which is Lupundori. And so if you ask a question, nobody will see you because it's still captured to my video. So they will hear your voice, but they will not see who you are, okay? So, and if you want me to stop the recording, so let me know, okay? So, okay, but please open your camera, and I'm gonna stay in bed because I cannot see you. I can see that you raised your hand, but I don't see you.
I'm not near the camera today. Is it all right if I still ask something?
Yes, please.
I was just curious if we were going to go over the common and uncommon preliminaries in this course, and maybe even how to know if we've attained them.
We'll just do some screening about the preliminaries, because this is for some lamas, for some teachers, in some traditions, those are prerequisite in order to go into Tantrayana. But I'm not going to teach in this course, I'm not going to teach the preliminaries. I think that if you want the teachings about the preliminaries, you can go to Lamalina's website. She has those preliminaries. Everything is there. Okay, we'll just string them because it's some kind of not some kind, but it's a prerequisite to in some of the some of the Tantrayans. So I hope what you disappeared. Namaste, you disappeared. So did you got your answer?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, you're here. Okay. So anybody else want to ask something? Yes, Corey. Are you also without your camera? What's happened with the cameras today?
I have no idea. It wasn't even working yesterday with
Yes, I
the
know. Last night it wasn't working. I saw you in Lamalina's Zoom and it didn't work. Well, I hope you're gonna fix it. Okay.
yeah, hopefully.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
yes, Corey.
Um, so will this class be discussing more about the subtle body, the causal body, and how practices affect or manipulate the subtle energies, and how which specific practices, what they specifically do? Because I know the different practices have different effects. So
Yeah. So I just want to say something because this is quite an advanced question about the Talung, okay? So we'll just give a brief. I will not dive into the deeper understanding of that. So Talung, for those who don't know, Talung is the practice of channeling the channels, the drops, and the lung, the prana that goes inside the channels, which sometimes called the Vajra body. We just discussed what is the Vajra, right? So, or the diamond body, the Vajra body. So those are very advanced practices. Actually, if we talk about secret practices, so the Talung are the most secret practices in the whole Tantrayana path. So I will not teach those Talung practices in this course, but I will give more knowledgeable in the third model. I will give more knowledge about how, not what we practice, but how we practice that and why we practice that, and some kind of a brief explanation about the different approaches to that. Okay?
cool. Thank you.
Okay, but I'm not going to teach the Talung in this
Yeah,
model. Okay,
sounds good. Thank
maybe
you.
yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe in the future, most of the time the Talung practices needed to be teach in personal because they have a great effect on our psychic and our body, also on our physical body, and if it's not practiced correctly, it can create a lot of some kind of a lot of harmful coincidence to us. So I don't want to to not to be able to help people to do that. And also, I guess that some of my teachers, and you will find out that I refer many people to many teachers, many of my teachers. I'm not a sorry, as you know, I'm a remake like Lamalina, and I love that my students and her students are studying with all my teachers. As I said at the beginning, I have an amazing arsenal of teachers, and each one of them is an expert in something. So, for example, for the Talung, I will refer you to those who will be, I think you can dive into this with them.
Cool, cool. Thank you.
Okay, so Laurel, yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm not a total beginner. I have studied Tantra and I have a Gaelic background, and now I'm studying Dzogchen. So my question is coming out of some experience, knowledge. I find that why I was attracted to check out your class here is that I still continue to find a conflict between the Tibetan imagery and my being a Westerner. And I understand there is a very strong reason or argument, you could say, to maintain tradition. But to make the tantric images relevant to a Westerner, this is sort of where things start to break down for me, because I'm not Tibetan. And, I'm a Southern California suburban gal. So, and I've studied art history and world arts and culture at university. It's not like I have limited myself, and yet, to be honest, this is a stumbling block for me. And I have not found anyone who's even willing to discuss it with me, or to bring it into the context of the teaching and learning of this system, for lack of a better word. I'm sure you understand what I mean. So, yeah.
So I hear exactly what you're saying. I mean, for me also, it was at the beginnings was some kind of struggling. But I can tell you that after I understood the reasons why we keep practicing with the traditional iconography, it's because I started to understand how it works on the subcontext, on the subconsciousness, on the subcontext with symbolization. Because what we have in the iconography is nothing to do with, nice painting, okay? Or beautiful painting or colorful painting. Everything in every one of those iconographies of the tantric deities has meaning, a very deep meaning. And when we'll dive into the psychology of Tantra, we'll dive a little bit into Jung. I don't know if you know the psychology of Jung, because that's how it works. It works on the subconsciousness. And so if you understand, like, for example, if you go to the hospital and they tell you that you have to have some kind of IV in order to put some injection into you. So maybe I don't like the injection itself, but I do need the medicine. So I just, I hold my breath, or I dip deeply, and I do that. And after a while, what happens is that you start to understand those iconographics, those tankas, those mandalas, those things that are working in a different way. And then all of a sudden, it's not an obstacle anymore. So I hope that I will be able in the future to help you to bridge this, because it's not about the way it looks, it's about the effect that it has on your mind. And we are all about how we are going to transform our mind. We don't want to know, we are not becoming tanka painters, although I studied that back then. And I painted a few tankas, but I did a very lousy job. I just studied that. But we're not going to be a tanka painter. We want to have those symbols being embedded in our mind. And this is very important for us. So I hope I'm going to bridge that for you, and hopefully.
Me too.
Okay.
I think there's an element of art that is very sacred, and there's many different cultures and traditions that express the sacred culturally. I do need to understand the symbolism more.
And the understanding of the symbolism is so important, because when you do understand the symbols, my main practice, people know that, it's not a secret, my main practice is Vajrayana. And I remember it took me about, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 months of solitary retreat to write a commentary on the symbolism of Vajrayana. So, and only when I completed that, I understood, not in my mind, it was in a different level of understanding. It was knowing, it was not understanding. Maybe the word knowing is better. I known what is, and then it helped me become that, because we want to transform ourselves into not the deity the way she looks, but to all the characteristic that this deity has as a Buddha, right? Whatever you practice, okay? It can be Vaitara, it can be Yamantaka, it can be the Dorje Purva, whatever, okay? You want the characteristic, so you need to understand the characteristic, right?
Okay, but then why are we imagining ourselves to look like that deity?
Because that's the way we embedded the symbolism.
Okay. All
We'll
right.
dive into it, okay?
Okay. Cute.
Okay. Wenzel, yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Do you think could it be an obstacle to have too much focus on Tibetan culture? And do you think can that be like a sidetrack from Dharma practice, or getting like too enwrapped in the cultural aspect? And how can we like distinguish the cultural part and the Dharma?
Thank you for this question, because it's very important. If you're a student of Lama Lena, you know we're so lucky. We're so lucky that we have a teacher that was living with Tibetan, like she likes to say, I am actually a Tibetan, okay? Although I look very Westerner, I am a Tibetan, because most of her life, like 50 years or something, she lived with the Tibetan. So she always explaining to us the differentiation between the culture, the Tibetan culture, and the practice. We don't want to mix that, the Tibetan culture is the practice, or the practice is the Tibetan culture. But we want to understand that, because it's been developed from there. So we'll make sure, thank you for this question, we'll make sure to remember that it's all about the context, okay? Okay, so I hope I'll remember all her jokes about that, so I'll bring it to you during the teachings, okay? Because she has a lot of jokes about the Tibetan culture, how it doesn't fit to the to the Westerner world. Thank you for the question. Misha, hi, good to see you. Welcome home. Are you still in Sopema?
No,
Oh.
unfortunately. But it's okay. Good times are coming. I just wanted to know why is there a red thread around your doji?
Oh, okay. That's very interesting, right? Why there is the red, okay. So,
Sometimes I see it with the pujas, but
yeah,
not
this is very,
just not a,
for me, it's very important, by the way, because after you're doing a certain amount of mantra, accumulated a certain amount of mantra in your practice, and after you're doing some fire pujas and you're, let's say, qualified to do self-initiation or self-empowerment, because otherwise you have to go to a teacher to receive the self-empowerment, right? So what you do is, during the self-empowerment, sometimes you see that with the teacher, what they do is they put, I don't know if people know what is bumpa. Bumpa is this vase that they pour the water. So they put that on the bumpa, and then this thread goes out, and it comes to your heart, and from the bumpa, which has been blessed, to your heart, the mantra goes. So it's a part of the ritual. Okay?
Okay, I see it in the pujas, but I didn't see it in one
Yes.
person.
So,
Yeah,
because I'm practicing that, so that goes with my Vajra. Okay.
cool. Thank you.
Okay, Michael, yes. Anything else, Misha? No, okay.
Hi, Lopo.
Hi.
I started the Vajrayana mantra yesterday. after the retreat.
Great.
I've been feeling very unwell. Started getting a hissing in my ears. That was yesterday on the bus. And I had to stop at about 200 and maybe 300. And then today I couldn't do any because I felt dreadful, very weak, and I don't really know what's going on. I'm not usually like
Well,
this.
I don't think that it has to do with the mantra if you just started to do it a couple of days ago. I think it has to do with something that you caught maybe somewhere.
Yeah,
So you better go and check with the doctor and see what's going on with you. So are you singing the mantra or are you saying the mantra?
saying it.
You're singing it like
No,
Drupala
I am
was teaching?
no saying, just chanting like in speech, not song.
Ah, not song. Okay. So
Mhm.
maybe, and when you say, do you say it fast or slow?
Um, Kind of fastish, yeah, because like it would take me about. Well, I actually found that the mantra was taking me a lot longer than I thought, because it took me 10 minutes to do one round at least.
Because maybe you want to slow down a little bit, especially if you don't feel good and you want to go to the doctor and see what's going on with you. But
Mhm.
sometimes when we do say a lot of mantras, I don't know how many are you doing a day, but when we do say a lot of mantras, it can create some kind of overwhelming energy, especially if our channels are not ready yet. Okay. So
Yeah.
I will rule out with the doctor if you have maybe you caught something and then maybe you want to slow down. Continue with the mantras, but slow down the pace of how you say that.
What about the garlic lump? There's a lot of garlic in the vegan stuff I'm eating because they put garlic in everything.
Garlic is always garlic. And I mean, the Tibetan
Mhm.
tradition saying that garlic is something that better not be eaten while you're doing a lot of mantras because it's something that blocks the channels. So if you eat a lot of garlic, maybe you want for the next few days to reduce that and see how it affects your body.
And
Garlic and
what about
onions.
alcohol? What about
Garlic
the
and
alcohol?
onions, by the way.
Yeah, but what about alcohol? That's the big worry with me.
I don't know what to tell you. It's up to you to decide if you want. I mean, I don't know how much you drink, but a small portion, I don't think that has any effect on that.
Okay,
Okay, thank you, Michael.
awesome. Thanks.
So welcome. So we'll conclude for today. We'll do the dedication and then we'll leave some more information or more teachings for the next few weeks going into the origins. And thank you guys for all your questions because I think they're great because everybody is very contributed by your questions. Even if you don't think, because you think it's a personal one, be sure that everybody is being triggered to those answers and questions, okay? So now in the world, there are a lot of wars that are happening. And I want to dedicate this special teaching that we had, especially the strong Vajrayana world that we are diving into, that may those old Gewa that we have accumulated here will bring peace and to all those worlds and all those wars that are happening all over the world from all sides, and the killing will be stopped. Gewa di nyu Chechi Sam Dropashu